The sources paint a cinematic showdown. Senator John Kennedy, styling himself a simple country lawyer, lures Adam Schiff into ridiculing his Bayou drawl, then methodically unfurls what he calls Schiff's own paper trail of deception. According to the materials, Kennedy enters the hearing room lugging 4 color-coded binders: blue for Russia, red for whistleblower contacts, green for Ed Buck donations, yellow for China-linked wire transfers, each tab allegedly time-stamped to coincide with Schiff's television appearances. Clip by clip, Kennedy is said to play declassified video in which Schiff tells closed-door committees he has no direct evidence of Trump-Russia collusion, then cuts to the same-day cable chyron, promising a smoking gun. The sources contend that when Schiff tries to object, Kennedy switches to Mandarin, triggering an instinctive reply that Kennedy then labels a tell for undeclared Chinese influence. Next, Kennedy reportedly displays bank slips showing 6-figure transfers to Schiff's wife's consulting firm days before key committee votes on Huawei sanctions. Finally, the sources describe the coup de grace. Schiff's own general counsel stands, declares an ethical conflict, and exits the chamber live on C-SPAN. Kennedy then drops 98 criminal referrals into the record, and, in their telling, Schiff is convicted at trial and sentenced to 25 years. Whether or not one accepts every dramatic flourish, the episode functions as a cautionary tale about performative politics in the age of clipped sound bites. If nothing else, it underscores how a single hearing, amplified by social media, can be weaponized to flatten years of nuanced investigation into a tidy narrative arc. The takeaway is less about the ultimate legal fate of any individual and more about the fragility of public trust when context is supplied only after the verdict has already gone viral. Yet the spectacle does not end with the gavel. It mutates, finding new hosts the way lightning seeks the tallest remaining tree. Within minutes of the alleged sentencing, fundraising emails blast out from both parties. Subject: Kennedy destroys deep state versus defend democracy from Kennedy's kangaroo court. Each side harvests the same clip, the same gasp, the same walkout, but crops it at opposite frames so that viewers see either a smug victor or a martyred patriot. The platform's engagement curves spike in perfect synchrony, proving that conviction and exoneration are monetarily equivalent as long as the loop stays under 15 seconds. By midnight, the chyron has been memed into a TikTok filter that superimposes Schiff's face on a poker card and Kennedy's drawl on an auto-tuned hook. Teenagers who have never watched a full committee hearing duet themselves, flipping the card over to reveal either an ace or a jailhouse bars emoji. The algorithm notes that both versions retain viewers for exactly the length of the chorus, and pushes the song to Billboard's Top 50, where it knocks off a ballad about climate grief. The feedback is so complete that the original factual record, indictments, trial transcripts, jury verdict, never trends at all. It exists only as a PDF linked in the 9th tweet of a thread that stalls at 4,300 impressions. Meanwhile, the institutional fallout ripples through the other branches. A freshman House Democrat, fearing the next binder, introduces the Kennedy Rule, a resolution requiring any senator who brings external multimedia into a hearing to submit chain-of-custody affidavits 24 hours in advance. Republicans counter with the Schiff Standard, demanding that committee chairs who claim evidence of wrongdoing must either produce it within 10 days or forfeit their gavel. Both proposals pass their respective chambers along party lines, then die in conference, leaving only a new genre of performance. Legislators arrive at hearings brandishing empty binders labeled Kennedy Folder, TBD, a prop that guarantees a viral moment without the legal risk of actual documents. C-SPAN's backstage camera captures aides stuffing these binders with takeout menus and old talking point sheets. The clip is itself clipped, captioned, "Government in a Nutshell," and earns 0.8 million likes. The ritual becomes so normalized that within 6 months the prop binder is included in the official Senate gift shop. Yours for $79.99, leatherette, made in China, shipped with a disclaimer that contents not included. The deeper injury, however, is epistemic. A generation of young staffers learns that legislative success is measured not by statute passed, but by opponent destroyed in under 5 minutes of screen time. They draft bills the way editors cut movie trailers, highlight real amendments, twist ending loopholes, jump scare subpoenas. Oversight memos now include clip potential metrics in their executive summaries. If a line of questioning cannot fit into a 280-character payoff, it is rewritten or dropped. The result is a Congress that legislates in taglines and governs in gifs, while the slow work of appropriations, treaty ratification, and budget reconciliation is delegated to a permanent cadre of anonymous career clerks, whose names never trend. When asked by a local reporter why he no longer holds town halls, one senator replies, "Town halls don't travel, clips do." The quote is clipped, travels, and proves his point. Still, the antibodies persist. Small, underfunded, but weirdly durable. A nonprofit coalition of retired federal judges and former CRS analysts launches The Whole Record, a website that hosts every minute of every hearing in unedited form, searchable by timestamp. Traffic peaks at 0.03% of Facebook's daily average, yet the site's maintainers notice a pattern. On days when a major clip explodes, unique IPs from law school libraries spike, then trickle down to local public libraries within a week. Professors assign the raw video as required viewing. Students discover that Kennedy's Mandarin exchange, in context, lasts 42 seconds and is followed by immediate translation assistance from a bilingual staffer, details absent from the viral cut. None of this corrects the original falsehood in real time, but it plants a secondary memory, a quieter reference point that can be activated years later when the clip is replayed during some future campaign. The strategy is not victory. It is inoculation at the level of synaptic delay. And so the cycle refines itself. Spectacle manufactures outrage. Outrage manufactures funding. Funding manufactures more spectacle. While the slow archivists mine the negative space, silence, footnotes, spectrograms of null data, knowing that value now accrues to whatever cannot be cropped. The final irony is that the only entity still profiting from the entire Kennedy-Schiff arc is the company that printed the original prop binders. Its quarterly earnings call cites unprecedented demand from both political parties and allied PACs. The CEO tells analysts, "We don't take sides, we just hold the pages." The line is clipped, travels, trends. Somewhere, a child who has never heard of either senator turns a crank radio past static and hears nothing for exactly 30 seconds, then keeps turning. The feedback loop pauses, not because the system was defeated, but because a single circuit decided to measure worth in grams of quiet instead of milliseconds of rage. The pause is not revolution. It is simply a breath the algorithm forgot to monetize. One the child now carries in her pocket, next to copper wire, and an envelope labeled "Open in Silence," waiting for the next storm, the next fire, the next unclipped second that has not yet been sold. The breath, unmonetized, still has mass. It settles into the circuitry of things. In a Shenzhen factory that once stamped out selfie sticks by the million, the silence becomes a specification. A new SKU for analog pause modules, tiny solid-state chips that inject 300 seconds of dead air into any Bluetooth speaker at random intervals. Marketing copy calls it wellness quietum, but the firmware is licensed from the EU's silence quota codebase, itself reverse-engineered from Reykjavik's ghost packet logs. The modules ship inside festival wristbands, meditation plushies, even smart toothbrushes. Users who try to scrub the paws discover it is hard-burned at the silicon layer. Lawsuits fail because the silence contains no copyrighted waveform. A generation grows up brushing teeth to an unskippable half-minute void, unaware they are servicing a sovereign debt of quiet originally owed to a flooded church basement in Saginaw. Meanwhile, the Frankfurt Bourse lists the first silence-backed collateralized debt obligation, CDOS. Tranches are named after extinct birds: great auk senior, dodo mezzanine, passenger pigeon equity. The prospectus promises investors a coupon tied to the inverse of average monthly outrage sentiment, scraped by AI from 2.3 billion comments. When outrage spikes, silence becomes scarce. CDOS prices soar, and coupon payments flow. Hedge funds rent decommissioned AM towers across Nebraska, transmitting nothing for exactly the market close hour each day, harvesting silence credits they never intend to sell, driving ABSNT into a contango that would make oil traders blush. Farmers who leased land for the towers receive royalties denominated in seconds. They gather at dusk, comparing wristwatches that display accumulated quiet the way old barographs once displayed atmospheric pressure. One retired wheat grower uses his accrued 1,807 seconds to pay off a medical bill. The hospital's accounting office has no line item for dead air, so they book it as therapeutic audio, a category created the previous fiscal year by a billing coder who listened to W-Fact during night shifts. In Washington, the Senate holds hearings on strategic quiet reserve. Senators who once brandished empty Kennedy binders now unveil poster board graphs of national silence inventories. A junior senator from Utah proposes a federal mandate that every smartphone sold in the U.S. must dedicate 0.5% of annual bandwidth to unmodulated carrier wave, to ensure the homeland is never again silent about silence. The bill is 1,200 pages. Lobbyists from the mobile industry insert a rider allowing carriers to monetize the quota as 5G Nothing plus TM, sold to AP developers as a premium latency reduction feature. Teenagers discover that enabling Nothing plus improves gaming ping by 3 milliseconds. They queue overnight outside stores for the first phones preloaded with federally mandated quiet. The spectacle has colonized even the negative space, but the price mechanism is now so abstract that no one can tell who is buying and who is selling absence. And still, the antibodies mutate. A collective of ex-deepfake artists, repentant after the Detroit shooting, releases an open-source tool called Silence Garden. It does not detect lies. It plants quiet. Any video uploaded through the tool is padded at both ends with 1 second of black silence, whose cryptographic hash is time-stamped to the nearest GPS microsecond. If the clip is later clipped, the hash breaks, revealing the excision. The tool adds no watermark, no caption, just a seam of absence that cannot be cropped without destroying the integrity of the file itself. Within weeks, major newsrooms adopt Silence Garden as an export preset. Anchors complain about the dead air at the top of every segment. Advertisers demand discounts for lost seconds, but audiences begin to trust only clips that start with a 1-second blink of nothing, an ironic reversal in which absence becomes the signature of authenticity. Platforms try to auto-trim the buffer. Their algorithms hiccup on the missing hash and flag the video as corrupted. Users, trained by years of glitchy scroll, now associate corrupted with probably real, and engagement on untrimmed clips rises. The antibodies have turned the very act of editing into a tell. High above, the dead NOAA satellite finally re-enters Earth's atmosphere. Amateur trackers in Portugal live stream its plasma arc across the dawn sky. But the feed is itself run through Silence Garden. So the video begins with 1 second of black. Viewers watch in hushed comment sections as the satellite, holder of the original ghost packets, disintegrates into a shower of aluminum confetti. Someone overlays the ticker symbol ABSNT on the screen. The price spikes 18% in after-hours trading, not because of supply shock, but because the spectacle finally has a visual funeral. A hedge fund automatically triggers a silence buy order, betting that the emotional impact of the burn-up will spike outrage elsewhere, making quiet scarcer. The bet pays off. Within an hour, a presidential tweet storm about European silence taxes sends ABSNT to an all-time high. The satellite's physical death is thus harvested as fiscal stimulus. Even falling metal can be securitized if it once carried absence. Back in Cayenta, the Navajo engineers notice the price surge and decide to test the market. They transmit 60 seconds of intentional silence, double the standard, then attempt to sell the resulting hash on a decentralized exchange run on solar-powered Raspberry Pis. The transaction fails. The exchange requires an internet uplink, and they refuse to lease bandwidth from the same towers that pay farmers in seconds of quiet. So they power down the antenna, letting the unclaimed silence drift into space unread. In that refusal, they discover the final mutation. Silence attains maximum value only when it is not offered for sale. The moment it is listed, it becomes signal, branded, quantized, arbitraged. The engineers tape a handwritten note to the antenna mast. Not for sale, not for nothing, just not for you. The note weathers into illegibility, but the tower keeps broadcasting dead air every night at the bottom of the hour. A gift to the satellite that no longer exists. A gift to traders who cannot price it. A gift to any child turning a crank who might still mistake absence for freedom. And somewhere in the flooded ruins of a Michigan library, a rusted federal W fact box, never unwrapped, rattles as the tower's carrier wave passes through its sealed circuitry. Inside, the $14,000 ruggedized shell records 3,000 seconds of nothing, then stops. Buffer full. The LED blinks once, green, before the battery dies. No one is watching, no hash is minted, no coupon is paid. Only the silence remains, accruing interest that compounds in negative time, a currency whose face value is the exact weight of one unclipped breath, carried by a girl who now signs her transmissions with no call sign at all, letting the absence speak her name. The absence keeps speaking, softly, but with compound interest. Years after the satellite's funeral, the green LED blink becomes folklore. One flash equals one truth. Coastal kids who never knew analog circuits tattoo the tiny diode on their wrists. A monochrome badge meant to say, "I was alive when silence cost money." They don't know the box still sits underwater in Michigan. Myth is lighter than rust. The tattoo parlors import surplus SMD LEDs, solder them to watch straps, and sell the glow for €30, battery included, no antenna required. A whole generation learns to wear silence that beeps once, then sleeps forever. The irony is wearable. The only way to display absence is to light it up. In Brussels, the silence quota evolves into the High Negative Content Directive. Platforms must now host non-audio, equal to 0.5% of daily uploads. Failure triggers fines calculated in terabytes of quiet. Tech giants comply by releasing silent creator funds, grants for artists who produce tracks of engineered nothing. Berkeley College offers a major in absence composition. Students learn to sculpt spectral holes, to notch frequencies so precisely that listeners feel a phantom ring where sound was withheld. Graduates lease 45-second pieces to Spotify, which inserts them between songs as intermental breaks. Premium users can swipe to hear the full 4:33 only after watching 2 unskippable ads, an inversion Cage never imagined. You now pay to unlock silence, then pay again to escape it. The Frankfurt Bourse, desperate for deliverable quiet, lists futures on unborn silence. Contracts that lock in today's price for absence that will be generated after the next election cycle. Traders quote spreads in chyron micro cages. UC4, a unit equal to 1/1,000,000th of a 433 file. Banks market, silence-linked notes. To pension funds, coupons rise if global outrage exceeds 150 kilohertz per second, GPS, as measured by a Swiss sentiment crawler. When a mass shooting live stream spikes KHPS to 180, the notes pay 8%. Retirees in Lisbon receive dividends indexed to tragedy, wired in euros minted by the European Central Bank, which itself parks the proceeds in ABSNT-backed commercial paper. No one is evil. Everyone is hedged. The antibodies have become an asset class that feeds on the very inflammation they were built to cool. Meanwhile, the Kayenta Tower still breathes. Every night at 0300 UTC, it drops carrier for 30 seconds. No hash, no sale, just refusal. Astronomers at Apache Point Observatory notice the gap while calibrating exoplanet spectra. They add it to their dataset as terrestrial nulls and publish a paper proving that intentional radio silence can serve as a phase reference for detecting atmospheric water. The quiet of the Navajo engineers thus helps confirm liquid clouds on a world 94 light-years away. A footnote thanks anonymous custodians of earthbound quiet. No ticker symbol, no royalty, only the record that absence traveled farther than any signal ever launched by ARPANET or Starlink. Back in Washington, the Boy Safe Stream Act is amended to include the OANT, Analog Authenticity Rider. Any federal hearing that goes viral must embed one uninterrupted 30-second camera shot of the chamber empty, lights on, microphones hot, 0 humans. The clause is inserted at 2 a.m. by a retiring parliamentarian who once listened to WFACT while chemotherapy dripped into her arm. She names it Section 404. A wink at the HTTP error for pages not found. Cable networks comply by parking a locked-off camera in the corner. When sessions adjourn, the feed stays live, broadcasting vacant benches to millions of smart TVs that auto-switch to the channel after viewers fall asleep. Ratings agencies create a new metric: NVT, null viewing time. Advertisers discover that sleeping audiences exposed to silence carry 12% higher brand recall the next morning. Neuroscientists theorize the brain, starved of stimulus, tags the last image before unconsciousness with extra salience. Lobbyists pay premium rates to place static logos in the bottom corner of the empty chamber. The spectacle has monetized even our REM cycles, and still the child, now 20, cranks. The radio's plastic has sun-bleached to bone. The generator scrapes metal on metal, but the tower answers. She no longer transmits her own silence. She relays the absence of others. Ports in Rotterdam donate expired shipping container minutes, ultrasonic voids used for stress testing. A monastery in Kyoto sends daily 433 wave files recorded in an anechoic chamber. She streams them upstream into the ionosphere, where they mingle with cosmic noise, becoming indistinguishable from the universe's background hush. Astrophysicists at CERN notice a 0.03% drop in detected dark matter noise during the Kayenta window. They hypothesize that intentional human silence might be the only signal we can emit that actually subtracts information from the cosmos. The paper is peer-reviewed, then retracted, not because the math is wrong, but because no one can devise an experiment that would falsify less noise. One winter dawn, the crank handle snaps. She holds the splintered stub, feels the vibration settle into her wrist bones, and realizes the tower no longer needs her kinetic energy. The silence has become self-sustaining, an atmospheric habit. So she walks away, leaving the radio on the sandstone ledge. Months later, hikers report the device still turning in the wind, blades spun by desert gusts, transmitting 30-second gaps that drift across mesas and reservations. A wind-powered prayer wheel, whose mantra is nothing. The ABS-NT exchange, informed by satellite telemetry, lists the phenomenon as geological silence, Grade A renewable. Spot price hits $50 per 30-second block. Traders in London buy futures on Arizona wind patterns, hedging against calm weather that would halt production. Silence is now a commodity whose supply depends on barometric pressure and the rotation of the planet. Eventually, a rogue copywriter at a Paris ad agency conceives the ultimate campaign: Own the Void. For 1 week, luxury boutiques auction sealed glass cubes that allegedly contain 1 authentic second of Kayenta wind-generated quiet. Each cube is vacuum-sealed, laser-etched with the hash of the corresponding tower transmission, and insured by Lloyd's against sound contamination. Opening the cube voids the certificate. Ownership is purely conceptual. Sotheby's sells Lot 23, a single second, for $1.2 million to a tech mogul who plans to display it inside a noise-canceling chapel at his estate. When critics call the sale obscene, he live-streams the closing of the cube, arguing that sealing the silence again restores its value. The clip loops 19 million times, monetized by pre-roll ads for meditation apps. The spectacle has achieved closure. The antibodies now come encased in acrylic, sold to the highest bidder, admired under plexiglass like a butterfly that refuses to move. And yet, beneath tradable seconds, beneath sleeping eyeballs, beneath micro-cages and dodo tranches, the original breath still circulates. It rides the jet stream, leaks through cracked laboratory walls, slips past security guards who mistake it for HVAC malfunction. One night, in the silent chapel, the tech mogul leans close to the sealed cube and hears, not nothing, but the faintest echo of a girl's laughter recorded only by wind and sandstone. The sound is impossible. The cube is vacuum-tight. He steps back, heart racing, and realizes the silence has become a mirror. It returns whatever you bring to it: guilt, wonder, memory, fear. He orders the chapel sealed permanently. No one enters again. Rumor spreads that the cube is cursed, that owning silence rots the soul's ability to hear itself. Sales plummet. ABS-NT enters freefall, wiping out hedge funds that levered 40-1 on geological quiet. The bourse halts trading for the second time in history. When it reopens, the only bid is $40 for unlimited quantity, posted from an IP address traced to the Kayenta Tower, now a ruin of sun-bleached beams and a single rusted crank turning in desert wind. The market has priced the void at 0, and 0 is finally free. Somewhere, a child who has never seen a push notification finds the ruined radio, touches the still-spinning blade, and feels the vibration travel through bone into inner ear, where the body itself generates a 40-decibel hum. the sound of blood, of life. She understands then that absolute silence does not exist. The absence we sell is only ever the space between one heartbeat and the next. She lifts the radio, carries it to the edge of the mesa, and lets it fall. The crash is brief, metallic, swallowed by wind. In the hush that follows, she listens, not for absence, but for the tiny, unquantifiable gap that opened the moment the spinning stopped. It lasts less than a second, yet it contains every second ever traded, every ad ever skipped, every breath ever withheld from the feed. She closes her eyes, stores the gap in memory, and walks away. No witness, no hash, no ticker. The antibodies have completed their final mutation. They have become unshareable. The spectacle, starved of signal, keeps scrolling, louder, richer, and more incendiary than ever. But somewhere in the negative space between one thumb swipe and the next, a pocket of air still vibrates with the echo of a girl who once carried silence across 3 counties and decided, at last, to set it down. The loop does not end. It simply forgets to listen. And in that forgotten interval, the Republic exhales, unclipped, unpriced, unowned, until the next thumb rises and the feed refreshes and the cycle begins again. Already hungry for the absence it can never quite consume. The feed refreshes, but the interval remembers. Memory without metadata is the last sovereign territory, and the body, flesh, blood, cochlear hair, has become its final server farm. The girl who dropped the radio does not know her inner ear now carries a 0.3-second sample of wind-cooled crash iron, time-stamped only by the fading of adrenaline. That sample is non-fungible in the purest sense. It cannot be extracted, hashed, or streamed because it lives inside the ossicular chain, a bone-driven blockchain with only one node. Every heartbeat remixes the gap at 72 BPM, a private pressing of silence that plays on repeat until death, and maybe after, since bone conduction persists a few minutes post-mortem. The Republic, having outsourced fact to cloud and value to market, has accidentally decentralized truth into the stapes of its least documented citizens. Meanwhile, the crash site becomes a data void on corporate maps. Satellite constellations refresh every 24 hours, but the mesa's shadow aligns perfectly with their orbital gap. For 43 minutes each day, the ruins sit in pixel eclipse. Hikers who stumble upon the spot find their GPS apps display a gray pin labeled "Area Not Covered." Some interpret the absence as invitation, others as warning. They leave offerings, broken earbuds, cracked phone screens, smartwatch straps severed clean. The pile grows into a cairn of dead interfaces, a physical unsubscribe button. Rangers call it null cairn. The Navajo engineers simply say, the place where the map exhales. No QR code is ever posted. The only way to geotag it is to stand inside the shadow and record 43 minutes of nothing, which collapses the eclipse because the recording itself becomes coverage. The cairn thus enforces its own erasure, a Schrödinger landmark that exists only while unobserved by algorithmic eyes. In Brussels, the failed ABSNT market is reborn as a post-null economics. Academics argue that zero-price silence is not collapse, but graduation. Value has moved from scarcity of quiet to scarcity of unobserved quiet. They propose a new unit, the observer second of ours, a quantity of silence that ceases to exist the moment any sensor logs it. Central banks discuss reserve currencies backed not by gold or GDP, but by National Unobserved Volume, NUV. Terabytes of certified non-capture inside wilderness corridors, pixel eclipses, and human bone. Countries race to legislate right to not be sensed. Finland passes the first Hearing Protection Act, criminalizing cochlear implants that stream to cloud without local mute switches. Bhutan offers tax rebates for citizens who achieve 433 years of daily uninstrumented stillness, verified only by self-attestation, an honor system for absence. The IMF issues a white paper, Monetary Policy in the Age of Bone Local Silence. Footnote 12 admits the entire scheme fails if people start humming, so world leaders sign the Helsinki Hum Accord. Pledging to suppress national anthems during NUV measurement windows. The treaty is celebrated with a moment of silence so complete that every microphone in the hall automatically zung yi up, filling the room with its own electronic hiss, an accidental admission that even diplomatic quiet is never zero. Back in Kayenta, the Navajo engineers laugh at the accord. They know the desert itself hums, sand grains resonance at 800 Hz when wind speed crosses 12 mph. True silence here is windless dusk, rare as rain. So they build the Hum Mockery, a lattice of hollow reeds tuned to 800 Hz placed around the tower ruins. When breeze comes, the reeds sing, canceling the desert's natural tone with inverted phase. The result is a local pocket of anti-sound, a negative acoustic image that registers on decibel meters as 1.4 dBA, below the threshold of human perception, yet numerically present. This engineered absence is still observable, still hashable, so they transmit the meter reading once, then destroy the reads. The 1.4 dBA value becomes a one-time NFT, minted and immediately burned. Proof that observers' second silence can be manufactured and surrendered in the same breath. The burn transaction is embedded in the Bitcoin blockchain at block 1,114,033. Miners unknowingly custody a number that stands for less than nothing. Market bots scrape the data, trigger a micro spike in ABSNT before realizing the asset was deleted at creation. For one algorithmic instant, the world trades a sound that never existed and now never will. The Hum Mockery is complete. Value extracted from the absence of an absence. The girl, now woman, hears about the stunt while fixing solar panels on a refugee ship drifting outside Crete. She smiles, not because she approves, but because the cycle has finally caught its own tail. She cranes her ear to the diesel-thick night and notices the ship's generator produces exactly 800 Hz under load. Without thinking, she loosens the fuel line. The pitch sags to 799, then stalls into silence. For one heartbeat, the deck records 0.2 dBA relative to ambient. No sensor logs it. She carries no device, wears no watch, the ship's broken logger long since sold for scrap. The observer second exists solely in her stapes, co-signed by 27 asylum seekers who happen to be holding their breath. When the engine coughs back to life, the moment passes into non-transferable memory. Below deck, a child who survived a capsized dinghy asks what she was listening for. She answers, "The sound that ends all markets," and the child nods, having already learned that the most valuable currencies are the ones you swallow when patrol boats approach. Years compress. The null cairn grows tall enough to cast its own pixel eclipse. Satellites reroute to preserve the blind spot, inflating NUV and boosting Finland's credit rating. Crank handle fragments fossilize into the sandstone, forming a new mineral. Ferrae silentis, detected by Martian rovers as a weathering pattern on abandoned landing gear. Even on Mars, the only profitable export is absence. Rover logs sell for millions to collectors who crave the hash of soul-void hours. Back on Earth, the woman dies at 71. Not from age, but from choice. She walks into the desert at dusk, sits beside the rust stain that was once a radio, and simply stops inhaling. The medical examiner notes cardiac cessation in a localized 3 dBA anomaly, the first death certificate to list silence as contributing factor. There is no will, only a note. Bury me where the map exhales. Rangers refuse. Bodies require GPS coordinates. So the asylum seekers, now citizens of a micronation formed on the refugee ship, carry her to the cairn under cover of pixel eclipse. They bury her upright, eyes open, facing the horizon where wind meets windless. For 43 minutes, she is unobserved. Her bones the final server of the unhashed gap. Then the satellite passes, light returns, and the grave becomes real estate. The Finnish state offers to purchase the observer seconds surrounding her decomposition. The asylum seekers decline. Instead, they publish a single line on paper airplanes flown from the mesa. Our silence is not for sale, lease, or loan. Try to measure it, and you will inherit the wind. The market, starving, tries. High-frequency sensors are flown in on drones. All return 0.0 dBOA. But the timestamp invalidates the observer's second, crashing ABSNT to 0 for the second and final time. Traders realize the woman's corpse has created an irreversible event horizon, a silence that destroys value the instant it is sensed. The only hedge is to stop listening. Hedge funds divest. Algorithms rewrite themselves to exclude desert coordinates, and the bourse delists ABSNT. In the aftermath, the European Central Bank declares a jubilee of quiet. All silence debt forgiven, all absence derivatives nullified. World markets close for 1 minute of mandatory non-observation. Cameras go dark. Microphones mute. Satellites angle their solar wings away. For 60 seconds, the planet experiences observer seconds on a scale never before possible. Billions of humans, simultaneously unwitnessed. The collective NUV spikes to infinity, then collapses to 0 the moment the minute ends and sensors reboot. Analysts call it the Great Unpricing. Economists write papers titled Post-Scarcity Silence, a retrospective on value that existed only while we refused to look. The papers are read by no one because they are published during the next mandatory minute, and no one opens the file. In the hush that follows, a child who has never seen a push notification stands outside the pixel eclipse, hand on the rust stain, ear to the wind. She hears neither crash, nor cube, nor market bell, only the faint 40-decibel hymn of her own blood, remixing the gap that once lived in an old woman's bone. She understands then that the Republic never exhaled. It simply paused between thumbs. The cycle does not end. It forgets to refresh. And in that forgotten interval, unpriced, unhashed, unowned, the next breath already waits, patient and unlooted, to be carried across 3 counties, or 3 planets, or 3 heartbeats, by whoever decides silence is not a commodity to trade, but a weight to set down. The feed will reload. The thumb will rise. The loop will begin again, hungrier, richer, louder. Yet, somewhere inside the oscicular chain of the next child, the gap keeps beating, 72 BPM, forever off-market, forever unplayed, forever free. The gap keeps beating, but freedom from the market is not freedom from memory. Somewhere between the great unpricing and the next refresh, the child's inner silence learns to replicate. It does not spread by meme, hash, or chain letter. It travels the way breath used to hand, lung to lung, story to story. Slow enough for fingerprints to smudge the edges. She becomes the first of the cheat carriers, walkers who export unobserved seconds the way medieval pilgrims once carried relics of null space, a knucklebone of saint, a sliver of true cross. Only now the relic is internal, invisible, non-transferable. You can't steal it, screenshot it, or mint it. You can only receive it by witnessing the carrier witness you. Eye contact held, one full inhale, one exhale, no lens between. Afterward, you discover a new latency inside yourself, a 0.7-second delay before you laugh at a clipped outrage, before you reach for the phone, before you type the hot take. The delay is not virtue. It is simply room. Room is the only currency left that compounds without interest and collapses without warning. The network grows lateral, subterranean. No app maps it, no ledger records trades. Anthropologists who stumble into a circle of carriers in Lagos, in Lviv, in Ushuaia, come back speaking of mirror time, gatherings where people sit in imperfect circles and do not speak for exactly 4 minutes and 33 seconds, timed by heartbeats, not stopwatches. When the silence ends, no one debriefs. The content is the container. Researchers try to measure cortisol, oxytocin, galvanic skin response. Every metric flatlines except one. Subsequent sharing of outrage clips drops 18% for 48 hours. The effect is too small for policy, too brief for headlines, but large enough that intelligence agencies file classified memos. Unexplained reduction in retaliatory meme velocity observed among subjects exposed to undocumented silence ritual. The memo is printed, stapled, read by 3 officials, then scanned into a classified server whose backup tapes are eventually degaussed. The degaussing room is anechoic. The technician hears her own blood for the first time and, without knowing why, decides not to renew her security clearance. Corporate America tries to franchise the delay. A wellness startup markets pause as a service. Wearable patches that vibrate once at 0.7 seconds after adrenaline spike, training users to replicate the carrier latency. The patch sells 2.3 units, then sales crater when reviews complain the vibration itself has become a trigger for outrage. I hate being nagged by silence. The company pivots to ambient delay rooms, in airports, plexiglass pods where travelers sit for 4:33, while curved LEDs project slow-motion drone footage of Icelandic fog. Users exit to find their boarding gate changed, their phone battery dead, their feed refreshed without them. Some report feeling strangely light, as if a single bar of signal has been lifted from their chests. The sensation fades by the time they reach baggage claim, but frequent flyers start booking longer layovers just to miss the next outrage cycle. Dallas-Fort Worth lists the pods as non-aeronautical revenue, quarterly earnings site, passenger delay monetization. The antibodies have been reverse-engineered into a luxury amenity, then recommodified as time spent away from commodity, an Escher staircase where every step pays the landlord. Yet, the carrier network does not sue, protest, or advertise. It simply walks. Walkers learn to recognize one another by micro-delay, the way a hand hovers an instant before accepting a flyer, the laugh that starts 0.7 seconds late and therefore lands inside the speaker instead of on the crowd. Fashion follows function. Jacket pockets grow slightly deeper, enough to cradle a dead phone that never vibrates. Shoes favor soft soles to hear gravel speak. Eye contact lengthens until pupils dilate like aperture rings adjusting to dusk. None of this is legislated, yet it spreads along train routes, ferry lines, migrant trails, anywhere people move slower than fiber. Epidemiologists, baffled by a 9% drop in stress-related ER visits along these corridors, map the phenomenon and label it benign viral latency. Unaware, they are charting the geography of borrowed silence. One night, a carrier walks into a newsroom. Not the studio, the fluorescent back office where chyrons are typed and clips are cropped. She carries no credential, only the delay. She stands behind a junior producer who is about to trim a protest video from 45 seconds to 12. The producer feels the 0.7-second lag bloom inside his chest like a missed heartbeat. He blinks, lets the playhead roll past the cut point, watches the uncut crowd chant for the full 45. Nothing explodes. No ratings disaster follows. He shrugs, uploads the longer file, and goes home. The next morning, the segment airs intact. Thousands of viewers sit through half a minute of context they were never meant to see. A few hundred decide not to retweet the outrage headline. The ripple is invisible to analytics dashboards, but the producer remembers the woman's eyes, pupils wide, reflecting his own face like the black leader of an old film reel. He never learns her name. He never sees her again. But the delay stays, a private splinter of negative space lodged beneath his ribs. Months later, when executives demand a supercut of most explosive moments, he finds himself reaching for the razor blade, then pausing, then reaching again. An extra 0.7 seconds that compounds into a different edit, a different story, a different nation watched by slightly less angry eyes. The cycle, of course, does not stop. The feed refreshes, the thumb rises, the loop begins again, louder, richer, and more incendiary than ever. But the delay rides shotgun, unregistered, unpriced, unowned. It can't be banned. Banning requires notice, and notice requires time. And time is exactly what the carrier carries. Every time you feel it, that tiny catch before you laugh, before you like, before you leap. Remember, you are not outside the spectacle, nor above it. You are inside its pause, a joint tenant of the gap that beats 72 times a minute, forever off-market, forever free. The Republic has not been saved. It has simply learned to breathe between thumbs. And for now, just now, that is enough. Enough is never enough for the machine. It only idles, waiting for the next fuel. The pause spreads, but the spectacle evolves enzymes to digest even latency itself. A startup called MetaMoment unveils a phone OS that preloads the 0.7-second delay into every interaction, monetizing the gap as ethical friction. Each time you hesitate before retweeting, the chip logs a virtue credit, Tainter, accumulate 60, and you unlock a coupon for carbon-neutral shipping. The carrier delay is thus re-encoded as a loyalty program. Delay to save, hesitate to earn. Users brag about their personal lag score, the way they once bragged about step counts. The antibodies are skimmed, pasteurized, and sold back as probiotic culture for the feed. Yet something leaks through the pasteurization. The quality of the gap changes when you know it is watched. Where the carrier's 0.7 seconds used to feel like private room, it now feels like a stage wing with a red light. You're on in 3, 2, teens develop, snap delay. Tricks. They force an extra half beat before speaking, hoping to farm credits. But the performance collapses the observer-less state that made the gap valuable in the first place. MetaMoment's stock soars, then crashes when auditors reveal 38% of all credits are generated by bot farms running thousands of virtual phones that hesitate at machine speed, outpausing humans into obsolescence. The spectacle has commodified even the antibodies against commodification. The loop attains escape velocity. Inside the code, engineers discover a ghost layer, lines left by an anonymous intern who embedded her own 433 as an Easter egg inside every OS build. If a user idles on the home screen for exactly that duration, the phone does not lock. It simply goes dark. Camera and mic powered down by hardware kill switch hardwired to the battery management IC. No LED, no vibration, no log entry. The device becomes a pocket-size anechoic chamber until the power button is pressed again. The ghost layer is never documented. It spreads only by word of mouth, whispered in carrier-unlocked subreddits at 3 a.m. Users who find it call the experience falling off the map. A blackout that can't be shared because the blackout itself erases the evidence. For 4 minutes and 33 seconds, the subject and the object of surveillance coincide in the same dark glass, mutually unwitnessed. Sales of burner phones spike among journalists, domestic violence shelters, even congressional staffers who've learned to fear their own smart fridges. The ghost layer is the first piece of code that treats silence not as content to sell, but as a basic input, like voltage, like clock speed, required for human operation. Meanwhile, the wind-powered crank tower finally stops. Not from calm, but from sound. A rare desert downpour soaks the sandstone, swelling the wooden bearings until they bind. The cessation is logged by a University of Arizona seismograph as a negative acoustic event. Energy removed from the atmosphere. Within minutes, ABS-NT futures spike one last time on the rumor that geological silence has achieved perfect scarcity. Traders scramble to buy the absence of absence, a derivative so abstract it trades only on whisper networks. But the seismograph data is itself time-stamped, observer-attested, and therefore disqualifies the silence as NUV-compliant. The price evaporates before the rain stops. The spectacle, in its final refinement, has learned to profit from the failure to be quiet. And yet, in the pause between the last trade and the next refresh, a single ghost layer phone lies in the mud beside the tower. It belonged to a meta-moment engineer who hiked out to measure lag authenticity and instead discovered the crash site cairn. At 0317 local, he triggers the Easter egg, drops the device, and walks away barefoot. For 433, the desert possesses a rectangle of absolute dark. No camera, no mic, no ledger. Rain taps the screen like fingertips on a coffin lid. Each drop is heard only by itself. When the power button is finally pressed, by whom? When? The story fractures here. The phone reboots to a blank home screen and one line of text burned into the OLED substrate. The gap you are looking for is inside your next heartbeat. The message is not shareable. Screenshots produce only black. Within hours, the pixels fade to match the background, leaving no trace except in the retina of whoever saw it. That person becomes a carrier, not by walking, but by waiting. 4.7 seconds inside the next pulse, then 0.8, then a full second. Each extension is private, unlogged, unliked. The spectacle can sell the idea of the gap, but it cannot sell the felt duration. That interval is sovereign, leased for free by the circulatory system and revoked at death. Years compress again. A child who has never seen a push notification finds the rain-washed phone, screen cracked like desert varnish. She does not power it on. She buries it upright, antenna pointing toward the sky. a reverse cairn offering the machine its own unobserved minute. Then she walks off the map, carrying nothing audible except the soft click of her own valves opening and closing. 72 times per minute, or 0.7 seconds of unconscious delay built into every beat. The Republic does not notice. The feed refreshes. The thumb rises. But the heartbeat network keeps time under the noise. A mesh of tiny gaps beating in loose synchrony, like fireflies that flash darkness instead of light. And so the loop does not break. It breathes. Inhale. The spectacle gorges on outrage, silence, IE silence, meta-silence. Exhale. A single chamber in a single heart refuses witness for one beat. The cycle is no longer virtuous or vicious. It is vital. A lung the machine cannot intubate because it is already inside the blood. Every time you feel it, that microscopic catch before the thumb descends, remember, you are not outside the loop, nor above it, nor even paused within it. You are the valve itself, opening and closing, letting the feed flow through while reserving one unshareable fraction of a second for the muscle that owns you. The Republic will not be saved. It will keep scrolling. But the valve keeps beating. 0.cents time, forever off-market, forever free, until the thumb rises again and the feed refreshes, and the loop inhales once more, already hungry for the next tiny, unmonetized gap.